Dr. Abraham Rugo is our guest, and he understands a lot about our budget and our budget making process and the goings on. Karibu sana.
Asante, asante.
Welcome. How do you feel? Yeah, this is where broadcast meets podcasts.
I like the setup. It's easy, at least no miking, and
Yeah,
no, it's easy. I like the way you guys are all easily dressed, like just the rest of us Kenyans.
Yeah.
I feel overdressed, but
Really? No, you look very sharp.
You're on brand.
You are completely
You're actually on brand.
no, not compared to Eric.
Completely on brand.
You've added color to the set like the rest of us. You're
No,
good.
thanks,
You're
thanks.
good.
No,
You're doing
good to see you guys. I've been
too.
following since the day you started off, and I like the vibes. I like the conversations. As a Kenyan trying to fix my corner of the world, I really like this one conversation at a time. Of course, still trying to look for stories of hope. And I see a lot of effort that you make to look for that one tweet of light.
Oh, yes.
Because these things can be very depressing.
They can.
Yeah. I like Janet, what she was saying earlier, that she has a lot in her heart. And I just wanted to give her that verse that guard your heart, for out of it comes the issues of life. Yes.
Thank
That's
you.
a nice verse.
Thank you. Now I know what verse I'm reading.
Give her the reference in the Bible so that she
Right.
knows.
I get it. It's Proverbs 3:23.
Yeah.
I think I'll
You
confirm.
can't go wrong with Proverbs and Psalms. In there somewhere, there's
There's always
either a
something
lesson
There's some
or
wisdom.
encouragement.
I agree.
Yeah.
I was
Oh,
reading
yes.
Psalms earlier, which clearly I should have come and said, even though my heart is according to the book of Psalms. But thank you for that, Dr. Ari. Thank you for that reminder.
Also, our good girl Jano, you know what she does,
Yeah,
right?
Makuts.
Bas, Jano Makuts. Ndio huyo.
Dani.
It is you know, you are the courtier.
Yeah, you're the He thought he was throwing it to me to finish, then we start the conversation. A conversation I'm really looking forward to having.
Yeah.
This quote, I'll say it. You'll tell me who said that without even giving any hints.
Yeah.
There comes a time when the nation is more important than the individual.
George Saitoti.
Right. And I was saying earlier that I feel that there are always times in the nation when this quote speaks volumes. Are you feeling that way right now, Dr.? Do you feel like right now we really need to center everything that's happening in the nation?
Oh, yeah. I think really because, first of all, I think it's important for us to remember that every time we have these conversations, we are not talking about stacks of trees and logs and buckets of milk. We are talking about people's lives. I mean, when you talk about 20 lives, 22 lives that cannot be accounted for, these are people's lives. These are people's brothers, people's dads, people's uncles. So we are talking about people. When you talk about 57 million Kenyans, we're talking about individuals who have a heart, who have aspirations, who want to succeed.
They all
you know?
have a story.
They all have a story. So the centering, the saying that now we must all ask ourselves, how do we make this collective called Kenya work for that person we consider the least in our society, for the leaders who have been given public trust, or rather who have been, assigned public trust, because it's assigned for a period of time, what are they doing? For me, the places where I lead, what am I doing? For you, the spaces where you influence. I think that time is now, and not to go too much into Bible verses. Esther was told the same. Who knows that you are there for such a time as this? Yeah, we in Kenya such a time as this. Some by choice, some out of necessity, some stuck because their green card has never come out. But all of us, tuko hapa. Sisi ndio tuko, and we are the only ones who can. And because all the countries we admire, people are busy fixing their countries. The Japanese are busy fixing their Japan. You may have your opinions. Love them, hate them. The Americans are busy fixing it the way they know how.
Yep.
Love them, hate them. They are fixing their country. The Germans, with a hung parliament and no government, they are they are busy to fixing theirs.
Yes.
The best they know how. We as Kenyans too must get busy fixing our Kenya.
Perfect.
The best way we know how.
Dr. You've brought it very well home. Last year, around this time, there was not much conversation publicly around the budget.
You're right.
Conversations were happening, but in certain elite quarters.
Yeah.
And by elite, I mean the people who were interested in budget, like yourselves. You guys were discussing budget.
Drop elite.
Yes. People like Dr. Abraham Rugo were discussing budget.
Correct.
The rest of Kenyans were just, okay, the budget is coming in June and all. But by the time we got to May, and into June, the conversation around budget was a big one. It was heated. We saw what happened to this country. We actually had a standoff because of budgets. And what we are doing this year, we want to fix this situation by beginning this conversation early so that all of us can get to understand what's in the budget. By the time we're getting to June, tumekubaliana, we are going forward. That's how we fix the country. And thank you for joining us. So that you can join us in this conversation.
Sure.
The budget policy statement is before Parliament. We discussed a bit of it last week.
Yeah.
And now we want to ask ourselves whether the priorities that John Buddy and his team have presented before Parliament are the priorities of Wanjiku. From your informed understanding of the BPS, what would you say?
Thank you very much. And it's good that you say that, because the budget policy statement, really, and you're right, we have been harping as the team at Budgeti Hub and a few other colleagues that this is the time to actually agree, disagree, fight, and everything. Because this is the time, according to the constitution that we have adopted and the system we have, this is when we decide the budget we want to have for the following year. The last 3 years, we have been on a spike of paying debts. And therefore, whichever way we go about this, even this year, a big portion of what we are going to be spending is going to go to put to the payment of public debt. And that then means that we also then have a bigger deficit of about 831 billion, which you would say it's about 25% or thereabout of the total budget, which we still cannot finance from our money, so we have to borrow. Then you look at the big portion of the rest of the money. A big portion is actually going to education. About 731 billion is actually going to be going to education. The big question there is, how efficient are we with the spending in education? You have a TSC that takes about 400 billion, the Teacher Service Commission, which accounts for the teachers of basic education, basically junior secondary school, senior secondary school, and the primary as we know it, the grade 1s to 6. But then you have a whole portion of people who leave high school, or in the new tracks, some of them will not even be going to high school, but are going into TVETs, the technical and vocational education training. Again, it's a big area, which over time we have not emphasized because we focused on university and made an assumption that everybody has to go to university. So that's already going, a fair portion is going to go into that. Then you look at healthcare. Healthcare is a unique case because there we have a bit of confusion, and allow me to say this. A bit of confusion because as per our constitution, we have devolved the provision of public service. So in other words, all we call UHC,
Right.
a lot of it is actually to be done, to be undertaken. The function is to be carried out by county governments.
Yeah.
Because again, devolution is not about creation of counties, it's the division of responsibilities. But you see that we are allocating quite a significant amount. Actually, our health budget at the national level is going up by about 80 billion.
To
80 billion to about 204.
204 billion shillings
yes.
is going just to health ministry.
To the health ministry at the national level.
At national level.
And there's a reason why I say that. Because county governments, once they receive their portion, their share of this, it's expected to be about 425 billion this year, they are going to also allocate
Health.
to health.
Yes.
But there's
In fact,
no...
the biggest chunk.
The biggest chunk. Average 25% to 30% of county budget actually goes to health. And then, of course, in between there, you have the honored, the dishonored, collective bargaining agreements, then you have shisha and all of those kind of things, and the payments that have been made and the ones that have not been made. We can talk about that later because it's something I would like to say about NHIF and SHIF and all that. There again, it becomes a question of, are we just throwing money after? Because before
Good
even
money
we,
after
yeah,
bad.
before even we come to to the insurance payments, a lot of this bulk of this money is going to salary payments
The healthcare budget.
for the healthcare budget. Yes,
204 billion shillings, bulk of it paying salaries.
Is a
Who
good-
are we paying?
So a good
Because
portion.
doctors are paid by counties.
So what I'm saying, a good portion of it is going to be the reimbursements, is going to be the running of these facilities, is going to be there's also salaries for the national health facilities, the referral hospitals that are still within that are within. But a good portion of that 80 billion is what we are allocating to the SHA, to the Chief and SHA, basically to the social health authority, as it were. So that also becomes a big portion of it. Then you have the allocation to, as I've said, you have allocation to counties, in that sense. Then you have your traditional spending on defense and security services, and then the rest basically then is distributed across all these other institutions. But in terms of order, the payment of debt and what have you, that is like the first minute, it's the biggest MDA. That becomes your topmost. But the challenge, and which now gets me back to the question, is how much of that is actually dealing with the real needs on the ground, which for me, the real needs are three. The first one is income creation, whichever way you look at it. Economic activity that is being spurred, which then puts money in the pockets of Kenyans. Because that's significant. Because out of incomes is when you expect taxes. And all the indicators that we are looking at are showing that actually incomes are going down. Incomes have been going down over time. Of course, cost of living is going up. There's a relationship right there. But secondly, you also don't see a lot of economic activity. So whether you look at exports, whether you look about lending to private sector, all those things are going down. In other words, which means there's no money circulation.
Yep.
Yeah. But banks are making profits. Record profits. So who are they lending? Where are they making these record profits from?
They're
lending the government.
Us being the taxpayer here, not us being the private sector.
Yes,
They're lending the tax.
we can discuss the us. But basically, it's because they've been lending government, at 16, 17, at one point even at 18%. Some are feeling like their hearts are also heavy because the interest rate is coming down. It's coming down, and they are wondering what. So incomes for me, I think, is critical. The second one is, and it's informed by our development direction. Because at the moment, Kenya is planned to be an economy that can grow. You have agriculture, you have arable land. You have a workforce, perhaps one of the best workforces in terms of training and exposure that is there. And for me, the second thing then becomes the question around food security. Food security, because food consumes such a significant part of your mental and your physical energy and your economic energy. If we were to use money as economic energy, it's a worry. The report last week, 7.6, I think 7.7 million Kenyans are not getting proper nutrition value.
Right.
And majority of them are children. Now, why is food important? Because if you're not giving proper nutrition, then you're starting to deal with questions of stagnation. You're starting to talk about children who then get affected in terms, they started to have stunted growth, and therefore, which means in future,
they'll not be productive.
You have adults who cannot produce anything because they are not able to function. But Eric, it's important to say that in this context of those first two, we are already staring at about 21 million Kenyans who are poor. In other words, who cannot make ends meet. That number is perhaps worse than even during the COVID time, and perhaps takes us back to the early 2000s.
Right.
Because 21 million Kenyans, you basically are saying out of every 10 people you meet, 4, if not 5,
are poor.
Yeah? We're talking about a third of that. So basically, we are about 60 million, give and take. If you project from the previous census, then you have 21 million. 21 million is 40%. So 40% is basically 4 out of every 10 Kenyans that you meet out here. So I don't know how it will work on this table. But that gives you a picture why food security becomes a huge priority. And I put it number 2 after incomes because Kenyans are not looking for where to beg bread from. They want the means to produce their own bread. People wake up early, people work hard in this country. But they
Very
just are not making their ends meet. And therefore we cannot continue to theorize value chain improvements. And I'll come to that in a minute. And thirdly, and related to that second one, is that because of these vulnerabilities and the numbers of people who have actually fallen into vulnerabilities, there is no way we are going to run away from social support. Some welfare system of sorts. The way we have managed it is that the four of us who are here, who have an income, we actually have become that safety net.
Yep.
All of you here send some money to somebody.
Yes.
Either to some family members, some people you don't know, you know. And yet they are the same people. So the same people who are providing this social safety net are the same people who the government, whenever it's thinking about new taxes, is coming for more. Because I mean, they have the money. For me, those are the three top priorities. But how then do they reflect when you come then to the budget? Let me start with the first one on employment creation. I think that there's a lot of talk still, even within this budget policy statement, of improving value chains. Agriculture value chain, the export value chain, and all that. But what we have seen from the last 3-4 years, and this has been actually we can even take a 10 years trend. There's been a lot of talk about improving, but there's been very little action around it. How do we know this? Because SGR was built with the purpose of creating an inward-outward, inflow-outflow. But what happens? SGR comes up full, but goes down empty.
Yeah.
Hata inaweza teremka free. Because it has very little load. Inaweza neutral. Naweka neutral, na save mafuta. Kutana kibarani.
Yeah.
But that's embarrassing. Because cabbages are getting spoiled in Kinangop. Milk is being poured. Animals are dying. Hides, actually, right now as we talk, we have an oversupply of hides and skins that are packed in different storehouses. Some packed in in fact, one of the reports by the Parliamentary Budget Office suggesting we put more money so that we mop up all these hides and skins and improve them. Our neighbors, Ethiopians, are exporting leather products en masse. We have the same climate, we have the same condition, so we cannot continue to talk about value chain.
And our livestock herd is actually larger than theirs.
Oh yes.
We have more livestock in Kenya than Ethiopia.
Yeah. So the point I'm trying to say is that we have all these value chains, whether in cotton, whether in coffee, whether in tea, in maize production. But as long as we are still emphasizing on importing the same goods we can produce, why would Kenyans be buying maize and beans from Uganda when Busia Uganda and Busia Kenya are the same? Share the same climatic condition. They share perhaps even the people work harder and the like, because that is how you start sparring. Then you have these other areas where then the consumption from agriculture, because if you produce, then you have school feeding programs. These are the programs where this food. So I think just as a start, those are some of the things I'm thinking that become very, very, very critical in terms of how then we will perhaps I stop there for a minute.
As you stop, we breathe in, we take that in, we take a break, we come back now with questions.
Yes.
Dr. Abraham Rugo is a man who understands the budget-making process. He's a public finance management expert. He's an economist. All those things to say that, right? And he and his team at Budgeting Hub have been working on budgets for many years. He says, looking at the proposed expenditure by government in the next budget and looking at what the people need, his opinion is that our focus should be on those three things: income creation, food security, social support. So how would that look like in the budget? And how would then that translate? Do we still need to spend 4.2 trillion shillings, or should it be more? Do we need to pay more taxes so we can then do all these things? That's the conversation we're having. Keep it here. One conversation at a time. This is Fixing the Nation at 7:30.
7:30.
Peter Otieno is acknowledging Dr. Abraham Rugo. He says, I like how he has clarified the areas. The picture of priority. I've woken up early. This Mwananchi is sharing simple, clear logic.
He is. The Monantry is sharing simple, clear logic for a doctari. And I'm saying that because other doctaris like to gaslight us with numbers. And they like to, it's true, they like to tell us,
Spend the numbers.
should I see numbers? Should I see numbers? Should I see numbers? Should I need? They take away from lived experience. They use numbers. For example, they tell you inflation has been going down month on month, year on year. But you know very well, like you don't feel that difference in your pocket. But it's hard to argue with numbers. So it's good to have an academic as well, someone who does understand the numbers deeply, tell you that you're not crazy. It's not, it's for real. There's no change happening. How do we fix economists? And there's one in particular, I won't mention his name. How do we fix economists, Dr. Rugo?
I think you need to appreciate that people, I mean, especially economists, they spend all their life, especially those who have studied to higher levels, building models. And models sometimes can be very, if you don't combine them with actual real street politic and reality, models can suggest very different things. You know, like for instance, all you just need to do is just enter certain variables. Janet earns 500,000, and therefore if we push her to give us 3,000 shillings more, she'll still be within her purchasing power capacity. So let's increase Janet's tax by 3,000. And then, but what you don't
So
know
Janet has
is
like 5 loans.
Precisely. It doesn't look at all these other factors. Anyway, just to say that yes, a lot of time is spent building models, but yes, at Budgety Hub, our goal is really to try and simplify complex stuff and present it in a way that even ourselves we can be able to. And perhaps I should take on that inflation discussion, because the government has been saying inflation is going down, but I want just to clarify that inflation is the rise in cost of a basket of goods. So what basically it means that when we say inflation has gone down to 3%, it simply means that year it went up by 3%. So let me give an example. You had 1,000 shillings. So very basic. You had 100 shillings. I hope all of you consume KDF. So you had 100 shillings. Janet, Janet.
I was like, I know nothing
Janet.
about I'm just listening to Dr. Please carry on.
Ngumu, actually.
No, it got a new name.
It got a new
KDF.
name.
So you had 100 shillings in 2020. And a KDF, so 100 bob perhaps could give you 10 KDFs. Then inflation happens. So instead of one KDF costing you 10 shillings, now it costs you 12 shillings. So 100, you still have 100 bob, but you can now afford 8 of them. Then the following year, it goes up to 13 shillings. You still have 100 bob, but now you cannot even afford 8, you now can afford 7. The following year, it goes up to 15 bob. Even it goes up to 20 bob. So this year, you still have 100 shillings, but you can only afford 5 KDFs. That's inflation. So even when you're saying, so some years it goes up by 2 shillings, some other years it goes by 50 cents, some other years so that last year was one of those years you say, the inflation has gone down, or whatever. It's 3%. It simply means the 2020 inflation was at about average 7% the last 4 years. So the cost of goods has been going up by 7%
Year on year.
Year on year. But you still are earning, and the reason why I have said that is because a lot of Kenyans, and probably to those who have already fallen from the income bracket, are earning the same amount of money they were earning in 2020. Very few have had any significant cost of living adjustments even on their salaries. And therefore, you're still holding the same amount of money, but the goods you are having to purchase, their price has gone up. So even when you say it's gone up, but it's now at 3%, it simply means based from 2023, in 2024, it still went up by another 3%. And that's what then means that what you could afford initially with 1,000 shillings, you no longer can afford. Fuel was at some point even up to, I think, 88, 88, 93, I think somewhere there. Then shot up to 173, and the joke around those who never used to buy the expensive fuel realize actually they could afford all along.
Yeah.
So that's inflation. And therefore, it affects your pocket so directly. Now, add that to the interest rate of borrowing, which has not been going down even when the interest rate has actually, the CBK has been reducing the rate. The banks have not necessarily, maybe the SACCOs have maintained it, at all that, although some have even increased some more fees on different things and all that. So basically that's what inflation has been meaning, and why then the cost of living is still as painful, because more people losing incomes, the number of poor people increasing, you have more dependence than you care to talk about. You can say you're not paying money directly, but your house help has more dependence. Your watchman has more dependence. Your car wash guy has more dependence. So, and when who do they turn to?
You.
It's you.
Can I ask you? I hope I haven't interrupted you. Sometimes I ask questions just like I'm in class 3. So let me put myself in class 3. Is there a model or a perfect sort of example where, as the cost of living is going up, there is still a cushioning for the economy? Because I think the one thing that I've grappled with for a long time is everybody is aware, and this is almost a global trend, I stand to be corrected, that the cost of living is going up, which means right now, citizens around the world are feeling a certain strain. And yet, I wonder why or how come a country isn't able to even that out or provide some kind of cushioning, or even think about the fact that they can see the pattern. Cost of living is going to go up. The goods will go up. The cost of paying fees, whatever it is. And now that you're saying that there's people who are affording less, they're not able to afford their lives more. Where is that sweet spot? And what is it that we're missing, or what is it that the government is missing that isn't able to cushion people against a rising cost of living? I just grapple with that because I'm like, bare minimum, as a leader, your role is to ensure that you're able to cushion your citizens against this rising cost of living, which is causing a whole ripple effect. So where is that sweet spot?
Yeah. So and there's no one specific model
Right.
that you can use, but a lot of countries that have been able to manage, there are normally two ways that you do this. One is that in such situations, you go for what you call mass employment to create an economic stimulus. Because the idea around consumption and being able to manage the consumption shocks is basically making sure that money is moving. Yeah. So making sure that, because when money is moving, then there's a lot of things that you get. The second one, which is major, is addressing the cost of food, both availability and cost of food. So you have countries where basically they have price controls. I was privileged to study and live in Germany, and the cost of basic goods never goes past a certain point. And a related one to the first point is basically when you say you're injecting money into the economy, is making sure that people don't fall below their current incomes, And in our current situation, you would do that first of all by making the cost of credit, the cost of credit cheaper, so that then you have more businesses that are able to inject capital into their businesses, Then you start dealing with other huge consumers of income. One of them is healthcare, because remember, the reason why sometimes you cannot afford food is because you have to choose between food and taking your child to hospital, Then, so you address the basic drivers of cost of schooling, of healthcare is a big one. Cost of energy. But what has been happening sometimes, which I feel pained about, is that there's this thinking about, no, let the market take care of itself. It will stabilize.
Right.
There is nowhere in the world where the market just stabilizes.
Requires a bit of government intervention.
Yeah.
It is made to stabilize.
It is made to stabilize.
Needs a little bit of
intervention. You have to intervene because that's the essence of government. The essence of government is to make sure that first of all you're cushioning your own citizens. You are cushioning by making sure that food production, food availability is there, food production is made cheaper. I know there's been a discussion of we don't subsidize consumption, but yes, you have to subsidize production. And some of the efforts, give credit where it's due. Some of the efforts, for instance, like providing fertilizer, we can debate, good, bad fertilizer, and all the mess that came in between there, which was really unfortunate.
I want to divert your attention just a little bit because, and we'll get back hopefully to that question around exactly the hows, but how does our budget policy statement right now match up to some of the things you've talked about right now? What do you see as far as income creation is concerned, as far as food security is concerned, as far as social support is concerned? Kwanza, social support, I would love to see it. Very curious.
I want to start with the social support because social support is a reality. It's no longer about, these lazy Kenyans, who are depending on government. People, it is not about lazy Kenyans. There are many people who have done everything they can.
Yep.
They go to, some of the people we support through the Inua Jamii program, are our old citizens.
Yep.
They still work in their farms.
They're active.
It's not like they just seated there, waiting for day 28, to run to the M-Pesa place or to the bank and the like. But what we've been observing, and even in the current, is that our spending on social protection has actually been going down. From 2020-21, we were at about 3.72% of our budget. By 2024, we were at about 2.87. So basically, we've actually been going down. One could argue that part of this is what then was going to be sorted out. And this, by the way, these are the programs that, for instance, we spend under the Social Development and Children's Services, National Social Safety Net, and all the senior citizen affairs, Jamii programs, and all that. Part of that was supposed to be sorted under NHIF, the Indigence program.
Yes.
Basically, where you have a social program. But what has been a bit difficult is that you have a lot of interventions that are social in nature. Whether you think about bursaries, whether you think about school feeding program, whether you think about Inua Jamii programs, but they're not necessarily speaking to each other. They are disjointed. So it becomes very difficult to coordinate them. And one of the proposals actually for this BPS is that can we start that process of actually consolidating bursaries.
Is that what the BPS is saying?
No, it's actually a proposal on, the BPS is not saying that.
Okay.
But one of the proposals that has been made both by Parliamentary Budget Office, by ourselves, is that it's time to start consolidating these programs so that then you know what exactly are they addressing. Right. Yeah. So that then, and remember, even county governments also are supposed to be, having some of these programs. But when you come to income generation, remember it's a mixture of things. One, there seems to be still a focus that implicitly that government should be the one creating opportunities. But we all know that doesn't work. And one of the intentions, and therefore there's of course now, like for instance, there's going to be a huge increase in the development budget, so to make sure that we are still spending on infrastructure. But the big question has not necessarily been that we are not spending on infrastructure, but it's the value of money that we are getting in terms of creating that infrastructure. Of the industries that have already been established, how much employment creation have they actually created? Of the socio-economic zones, special economic zones that we have established, how much employment creation are they creating in those places? Of the goods that are being produced in the different different sectors, how much of that is finding its way to the market? How much of it is getting exported? Coffee, tea, all these agricultural products that we produce, how much of it is actually bringing a return on the farmer so that the farmer does not have to, in the morning they're in the farm, in the evening they're selling Tumba clothes by the roadside, because really their main economic activity cannot sustain them, in that. And the last part of it, which and BPS talks a bit about it, which has to do with this, reducing interest rates so that there is more credit access to the private sector. But at the same time, government is planning to borrow more domestically. So again, brings us back to the same challenge that we have been trying to run away from, where government becomes one of the key players. And you see, when government borrows from the credit market, it does not necessarily put that money directly into gainful economic activity. Because some of it actually just goes. The way it works is that they basically borrow here to pay the guys who are due.
Pay Peter to pay Paul.
So then it becomes a vicious. So the discussion is there on the BPS. And the goal is, will this actually be followed through? And finally, on income, before I come to food security, is there's been a lot of talk about fiscal consolidation. That's just a big word of government rationalizing its spending. Now, you've seen some of the movements happening with the state-owned enterprises. 10 years later. Abdikadir and Karokariuki's report are finally coming to life, but 10 years later, where you have about, to the numbers of about 300 state-owned enterprises, a good number which are not profitable. They were supposed to be bringing in, they were supposed to be investments that bring in a return. But now they become a place where we just spend money and more money on that. So that consolidation has to be real, because then what it does is that basically it reduces the burden on government. The consolidation also means paying off debts, because a lot of pending bills, which are supposed to be supporting economic activity, is actually being held by these institutions. Finally, on food security, I think this is a mixture. Again, here we see a decline. Like, for instance, when you look at the BPS allocation, suggested allocations to fisheries and marine livestock development, actually there's a decline. There are huge cuts coming in those sectors. Yet those are the same areas we are saying we actually want to boost productivity. So I think it's a balancing, and somebody, of course, could ask, so where do you expect this money to come from? Our suggestion has been that perhaps it's time we cannot run away from a discussion on debt restructuring. I know it's a controversial discussion.
It's necessary, though.
But it's a necessary discussion.
Why do we avoid it?
We avoid it because we want to continue looking like cool kids.
Okay.
We don't want to
appear like we're in distress.
We're in distress.
I mean, see that shit.
Pesa kwenda kulipa wewe. In fact, kata na kutumia saizi.
Debt restructuring. But we don't have a problem with it. You're saying the people who should be prioritizing it are the ones who are avoiding it?
It's a bigger problem than that. Because for all those who have treasury bills and bonds, you are part of that discussion.
They don't want to hear that.
They don't want to hear that discussion.
Because you are owed by this government.
You are owed by this government. Then you hear, I give them at 18%. You're saying that now they're going to give me at 14%, they are going to repay me at 14%, but they're going to pay me longer. This is money I had planned for.
Sorry, I'm having an absolute panic attack right now, because when you said debt restructuring, external debt, I went to
Chinese, Eurobonds.
Yes.
What did
You're coming after T-bills and
of our
bonds.
debt is domestic?
It's 50%. It's half of our money.
Half of our debt.
So half of the 11 trillion is hapa. And it's the one we have borrowed, and it's the one that, allow me to say
Can we
this.
restructure foreign debt?
And now you see the kind of problems I get myself into every time I talk about it. The reason I'm saying this is that when you take a typical example, you go to your circle and you tell your circle guys, hey guys, I owe you money. The fact of the matter is that I cannot be able to pay you at the current rate. I've been paying you at 50,000 per month or at 20,000 per month. My income has gone. I'm able to pay you 10K. So what I'm asking you to do is change the terms. I pay you longer, but I pay you less so that it's manageable. Because when you have to fork out 70 bob out of your 100 shillings, that has been the case the last 2-3 years. And then you're left with 30 bob to take care of security, to take care of education, take care of health. Then you end up borrowing the same amount that you are paying. What does that mean? It basically means you are actually postponing the achievement of dreams for an entire generation.
For an entire generation.
Yeah.
Who said
that?
I mean, yeah, please, you need to quote it next week.
Yes.
Guys, I mean, let's be real. Countries have gone through this road. It was painful. Argentina went through it. It was painful. Greece went through it. It was painful. But now they are stable. Or they are stabilizing.
Any African country that's gone through it?
There's been a discussion around, Zambia has been going through that discussion, a bit more injected from outside. Ethiopia is having a similar conversation. and other,
Ghana.
Ghana actually went just through. They didn't have a moment to restructure.
Right.
They were restructured. They just went through a dip. A month after verses being read
Walifungiwa
around,
nyumba.
walifungiwa tu nyumba. Yeah, so there was no warning. They saw the warning, but they chose to believe that, people are just over-exaggerating.
Landlord wangu ni mzuri.
The way he has not been talking to me of late, he understands. She understands that now, we are now in a good place, only for you to come in the evening and find a second padlock. So that was the case in Ghana, because basically just guys got just. I think if this conversation begins now, whether we go for a debt swap, where we swap our current debts with more longer-term debts, or we actually go for a head-on restructure, and the reason for that is you're spending upwards of, so this year, we are expecting to collect about, give and take, 3.2 trillion, in terms of everything. Yeah? Then you are paying debt about 1.4. Basically, almost half.
Yeah.
And the other years we've been paying more. When it comes to ordinary revenue, I've just said we've been paying up to 70 shillings. And now it's lesser because now we don't have any bullet payment this year. So this year and next year is a bit of a quiet, calm moment. I think that discussion needs to be held because we need to release more money into the economy. We need to be able to take care of healthcare. We need to be able to take care of education. But lastly, we must deal with corruption. There's no way we can keep postponing and hoping people will just one day wake up and become good boys and girls. Rule of law is what makes people behave in other countries. But and the reason for that is the amount of money we are losing in the education sector. Capitation is released, books are not in school.
Yep.
Of course, we can only focus on the delayed disbursements. Yeah. But when the money finally gets to the schools, is it all spent for the purposes for which it was disbursed? Healthcare, when the money hits the health facilities, their accounts, is it all spent for the purposes for which it was sent? When money is released for a tender for a road fixing, whether it's maintenance or construction, does all the money go to what it's supposed to be? For industry, the cherry fund on coffee, does all the money go to actually sort the people? Because if we don't do that, remember the 21 million plus the 30 million that are basically helping hold them.
Right.
They are watching. And there's only so much that people can stomach.
One day it'll snap. Dr. Rugo, this was a good conversation. And it's important that we keep having these conversations and opening our eyes. Because, like we said at the beginning of this hour, we are right there in the throes of making our budgets. But I think there was a question that you wanted to ask that was critical before we conclude.
Interventions. Yeah. What can we do if we don't like what we see in the budget policy?
Oh, yeah. So memorandums were being sent by yesterday. So we sent a couple. Some of the things I've just talked about, a lot of them is what was in these memorandums that we sent. And there are a bit more others which are more technical about even how we calculate our GDP and the like. Two things you can do right now. One, you have a member of parliament, whether you voted for them or not. Go find them. Send them a message. Ask the questions you are asking. You don't have to have any economic ideas. Ask questions. And my colleague Cuba last week said as much. Because in the next 2 weeks, the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly will be consuming all these memorandums. But that does not mean they cannot receive input. But two, they will take it to Parliament of the floor of the House, I think by next week, Thursday, this week, coming week on Thursday, and table the report. The report will be discussed on the floor of the House. These questions need to find their way in there. And the more of us who are asking questions, how better will we spend on education? Because the bigger challenge over and above our allocations is just how badly we spend.
Bas. So the thing is, your MP is in Parliament. They should know that you know that they are supposed to be asking these questions next week. And if they're not asking these questions next week, yeah, they are our employees. Dr. Abraham Rugo is a budget and public finance management expert. He's been our guest for this hour. Thank you very much for this. Every Tuesday we'll be looking for ways in which we discuss various aspects of the budget as we get towards June, we will not get to June like we did last year, where we just wake up one morning and be like, yeah. Nah, this time it will be different. We're fixing this nation one conversation at a time, 2 minutes after 8.